dynamic, so that something's occurring, so that you have the ability to see that the person is remembering a moment in the past where they had dipped their hand or an arm into a bucket of ice cold water, and then they are remembering the feeling of their arm getting used to the cold. And I haven't talked about it being numb, but actually that's kind of what starts to happen when the arm starts to get used to something. So that this is a universal experience, and the experience is eliciting the state that would be necessary for something that you're going through. In this moment, maybe a sense of analgesic response. Okay, let me clip that. That's on. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do a demonstration, and basically a demonstration about state-dependent memory learning and behaviour. And Deanne has come up as a midwife, and she's interested in experiencing the phenomena of having an analgesic reaction take place in the body. So her body is really aware that it has this ability, and I'm going to be using some experience in the past that Dee's had, actually, where she really was able to move through something and not so much be concerned about anything other than there being a degree of comfort there. And so I'm going to be explaining things as we go here in what it is that we do. Okay, so now the very first thing is you'll be lengthening your inspiration through your nose, and imagine that you're feeling that you're going inside more, and that you'll feel yourself slumping a little. And what I'd like you to do is to cast your eyes over here just for a moment, and then you'll have the ability to close them again as you really enhance this process. So what I'd like you to do is to imagine that you have the ability to focus on this space somewhere here in the air, actually, and that you're focused on a spot there in the air. And as you focus on this spot in the air, as much as you can be doing this, going in and doing the things that I'm sharing with you, the more that you'll be enhancing this whole process. So you'll focus on this place here, and now you don't need your eyes so much to be focused on me anymore, but you'll be going more inside. And so you focus on this place in the air, and as you focus on this place in the air, feel your eyes starting to dissociate and dilate a little, and allow your eyes to start to dilate. And as you allow your eyes to start to dilate, as you're figuring on focusing on some place in the air there, just as you feel the need to want to blink now, allow your eyes to close and feel yourself relaxing more. In the moment, what I'm going to have you do is go back to some experience that you've had, and maybe it was really a beautiful place where you were. When you're remembering some beautiful place where you've been, allow one of your fingers to lift, indicating that this finger is your yes finger. Okay. And whilst you're there, okay, now take some time, maybe 3 minutes now or so, to ever so gently relax and imagine that you're there at this place, looking around, and that you have the ability to go through that day and see other things and remember other things that were occurring in that day. And whilst you're doing that, I'll just share some things with everyone else here, and you'll know when it is that I'm sharing something with you and when I'm sharing something with the group. Okay, so the first thing that Dee did was she literally, when you're trying to focus somewhere in the air, of course, you know, there's no place that you can focus on, and so what it does is it naturally has the eyes dissociate, and the person is wanting a little more to go inside, and so that's partly what's occurring as a result of what I did with the eyes. The other thing was that we wanted Dee a little bit to be in her ability to be sequencing things somewhat, so I had her bring her eyes over to the right a little rather than over to the left. And so the other thing was I was suggesting things that Dee would do, presupposing that there were some presuppositions in naturally that Dee is going into trance, presupposing that she would go into trance and be relaxing. And so the other thing that has happened here is I asked her to go back to some experience that she's been before, which was a pleasant experience, because we want kind of to elicit a whole brain functioning state as much as we can. And now the other thing that occurred was that I set up an idiomotor dynamic where I asked her to lift a finger for yes, and so Dee lifted her the index finger on her right hand to indicate yes, and so yes was being linked. You're feeling like you'd enjoy relaxing a little more, and everything can be part of this, and you can be imagining what a level of relaxation you can reach today, and that's okay, whatever that level is. The main thing is that you'll be feeling a sense of lightness inside, and that you're feeling that the more that we're going through this process, the more that you have the ability to be relaxing. And now what I'd like you to do is you can just bring this hand here like this, and imagine that you have you're remembering the sound of the surf breaking on the beach. And as you are hearing the sound of the surf breaking on the beach, you can remember looking down the beach, seeing the waves and the sunlight in the waves. You can remember a moment in the past where you're walking down the beach and feeling the sand underneath your feet. And you're walking, and sometimes the sand is a little dry, and other times you walk close to the surf and the sand is a little wet. And then sometimes you walk right close and it rushes up past your ankles, you see, and starts to draw the sand back out from underneath your feet, and you're feeling. And sometimes you turn to face the sun and feel the sun penetrating your skin. And other times you turn to walk back along the beach and feel the sun penetrating your skin on your back, and feel the soft sea breeze. And what I'd like you to do now is listen to the sound of the surf breaking on the beach. Allow this finger to ever so gently raise as you turn the volume up on the sound of the surf inside your head, and allow the sound of the surf to be inside your head. And every time that you turn the volume up on it, allow this finger to be raised, and the more that you turn the volume up, the more this finger raised. And the main thing is that you have this sound of the surf inside your head for this little moment. And this whole process will take maybe about 5 minutes. And sometimes there'll be a little ebb and a flow of the sound, and then you'll indicate that with your finger lowering and raising a little. And what an amazing thing it is that you have the ability to have the sounds of nature inside your head. Sometimes maybe it's the sound of running water trickling, or a babbling brook, or maybe a waterfall, or maybe you're in a valley looking down at the river and you hear the sound of the rocks rumbling in the bottom of the river as water rushes over the rocks. And what a wonderful thing it is to have the sounds of nature inside your head, and imagine every now and then that you even turn the volume up even more, and how loud sometimes that can be, and yet how comforting and soothing the sounds of nature can be, that you're feeling at one with all things. So it's a good idea to be with the person as much as you can be, and also to incorporate the things that happen, because that's very much part of everything. And so what I'm going to have Dee imagine now is that she's going to imagine now that she's going to dip this hand into some ice cold water. And as she's dipping this hand into some ice cold water, you can be imagining that your hand can lift off your knee. That's right. Excellent. And this time round, so actually the more that you dip your hand into the water, you can hold your hand up here. The more that you dip your hand into the water, it'll come down, and allow me to do this just a minute. It'll come down to about there, when it's right in the water. Okay. So you have a bucket of ice cold water, and that you're dipping your hand into that water. And what I'd like you to do is to imagine that you're hearing the sound of the surf still, and allow this finger to ever so gently raise as you're hearing the sound of the surf. And as you're hearing the sound of the surf, and you're ever so gently lowering your hand into that ice cold water, and when your hand is all the way in and you can feel the water lapping up around your arm, allow your hand to be there for a little bit as it gets used to the cold. And whilst your arm is imagining that it's getting used to the cold, you're hearing the sound of the surf breaking on the beach. And intermittently sometimes you are feeling the ice cold water, your hand dipped into that ice cold water, and other times you are hearing the sound of the surf, and sometimes both is happening. And every now and then the sound of the surf will get a little louder, and so allow the finger to raise as it gets louder. That's good. Alright. Okay. So in a moment I'll come back and we're going to do some more things here in a second. So the main thing is also that you're creating a degree of incorporation, so that the person is doing things. And the moment that your hand has got used to the cold water, what I'd like you to do is to bring this arm back over and place it on your leg. Okay. All right. Now what I'd like you to do is, as you hear the sound of the surf again, allow that finger to raise, and whilst you're hearing the sound of the surf, allow that finger to be raised. And in a moment I'm going to ask you to lift this thumb, and what I'm going to have you do is, when you lift this thumb, you're going to be feeling this hand where it is, and you're going to be feeling it on your leg. So as you start to still be hearing the sound of the surf breaking on the beach, sometimes you'll turn the volume up a little, and other times you'll turn it down a fraction. As you're remembering feeling your hand on your leg here, and you totally are feeling the sensation of your hand on your leg on this side here, you'll allow this thumb to ever so gently raise. And the main thing is, whilst this thumb is raised, you'll be remembering your hand is in this position. And the more that you are remembering this hand in this position, the more you have the ability to raise this thumb. And take some time as you go into the feelings that are in this leg, and the relationship of the joints here in your arm, and how they're feeling. And the main thing is that whilst you're doing this, in a moment your body is going to feel the effects of what it is that we're doing here. Then it will know something that it already has some insight into. The main thing is that it'll have some sensations that are going to occur over here on this hand. So ever so gently, the more that your thumb raises, the more that you go right into this leg and feel your hand on the leg, and you go into your hand and feel your hand on the leg, and feel the relationship of your arm being bent. And the main thing is that whilst you have this thumb raised, you're feeling your hand on your leg. Okay. And when you are totally feeling your hand on your leg, indicate by wiggling that thumb that's raising, wiggling the thumb a little bit, indicating that you're perfectly feeling your hand on your leg here. Okay. And whilst you're feeling your hand on your leg, keep your thumb raised, and turn the sound of the surf up a little bit. Okay. Now in a moment what I'm going to do is I'm going to move your hand to another location, and you're going to remember feeling your hand where it is. And whilst you're feeling your hand where it is, your thumb is going to be raised. in a moment you're going to be waking up from this. And it's a good idea to feel relaxed and fresh when you wake up. And that your body has had a sensation of something occurring, and that you've had the ability to move away from the sensation so much that you hardly even felt what it was that occurred. In a moment now, I'm going to clap my hands and everything will be sped up again and you'll feel relaxed and fresh and ready to start. Alright, move around a little bit, Dee. Just for a second. Is that on? Alright, okay, now, do you know, well I guess, what happened to your hand? What happened to your hand?
When you bit it?
Yes.
It didn't really hurt at all. Just
how did the blood dripping out of your hand?
you are so smart.
Okay, so tell us what it was that you felt. Was it a sensation? Or?
It was kind of, just felt kind of numb and floppy. Didn't feel like there was much circulation in it.
Okay. So basically the technique was involving degree of dissociation away from the sensations that are ordinarily there actually. So that the numbness was created as a result of putting the hand into the ice water. And you notice that all through this I set it up with Dee so she could share with me how she was going in the process. That's very important because you need to link with the person what it is that's occurring, so that you're totally in tune actually with things that are happening there. And one thing that happened here is I was kind of with the group, right, and then finally you got to a place where you really were, you went really down quickly. What was it that happened in that moment?
I was getting tired of just holding it up and just wanted it done.
Okay, so now as slowly but surely as the person really enters into this state, okay, you know, the person could be there for quite some time, like hours even, with their hand out, when you're already in trance. So anyway, the one thing about this is that you always really should be as much with the person as you can be, and to incorporate anything that does happen as that's everything is part of the process. So the thing that I thought of was that possibly, you know, you got to a place where your arm was feeling a little tired, or possibly that you arrived at something in your mind actually, and that something had occurred where it brought you back a little bit to the room. Mostly too, a person is wondering, I said to Dee, and you may be wondering about what level of relaxation you can reach that, because that's probably true. There probably was a piece in Dee that was thinking, I wonder how much I'm going to be relaxing here in this state. So that's kind of pacing something that possibly is occurring or would occur anyway. And also it's linking the possibility of the person relaxing a little more, and also that it's okay, whatever level of relaxation the person's reaching, that each level is okay. Because the person themselves may be thinking, oh dear, I wonder, I'm really kind of I wonder whether I'm actually there yet. And so
it was good for you to say something about you'd like to feel more relaxed, because really it was, I put it down to feel more relaxed instead of it just holding it up there. And I know someone else could have said, oh, why did you do that? That wouldn't have helped.
Okay.
To make you feel like you were doing it wrong, or whereas what he said made me feel more at ease, like that was fine. Okay, so now there's varieties of that technique that you can use with various things.
They did something last session with me and walked in upstairs, and Ned or Johnny or somebody was about to end the trance, and then it was like, as they were kind of inviting me back, David said, and you might be wondering, same thing that you did just then, actually my conscious mind thought I was coming back, and David walks in and says, You might be wondering how much more deeply you could go into this relaxation before you come out. And I went, And I've been using that now when I do the induction at the end of the yoga class.
Yes.
Like I'll almost say something like, you might want to come back into the room, but I'll weave it together with and before coming back you might want to go even deeper, and I'll see people go, and that seems to be the deepest place almost.
Yes, so embed the command, so you would say it in a way like this, and I'm going to be counting backwards from 10 or whatever it is, the way that you set the whole thing up for the person to come back, into this state. And I'm wondering, maybe you'd enjoy feeling that you have the ability to go deeper and feel yourself sinking even more into this state, and then allow some time to pass, and then, I'll clap, or you'll naturally open your eyes and you'll feel fresh and relaxed and ready to start. Another thing I often do is have things sped up a little bit more. Okay, when the person, because actually, when the person's in trance, partly trance state is that things are slowed down a little more. So that's part of that. And so then it truly is linked to trance, that the person comes back into a state of alertness, and things are sped up a little bit more. It's more likely that everything that's taken place somewhat has taken place more in an altered state of awareness. So naturally people tend to, if you're telling them to come back from a relaxed state and you get to 1, mostly people are wanting at that point still to even go a little deeper. So, I've incorporated that. That was what I did then, that point with Jenny upstairs.
If anyone's interested to feel my hands, because there is still a big temperature difference. Can you tell? Can you tell?
This would be a good service act. It's like the old hypnotist tricks. Now, work like an dog.
So many people tell my hands.
Something that Dee can do really in the work she's doing with women especially, what a wonderful thing it is that the woman mostly can totally be doing this herself and not having to have the aid of drugs and things like that to take sensation away, when she has the ability quite remarkably to do this herself, to have the person walk into some ice cold water actually, and to imagine that they walk all the way into this ice cold river, all the way up to past their navel, and so do the same thing more or less, and using that. And then the other thing is that the more that the person practices this before the delivery, that she has the ability to have that anchored, that state anchored, so she can get back there, and that she has the ability to instantly come back to warmth and sensation again as well. So
would it be a good idea to maybe get like a wave tape and anchor it to that tape and then play that tape during?
Yes, anything that you're doing like that is going to really help, like really dovetail the memory and anchor what it is that she's in need of. Yeah.
With Lotus's birth, when I was stitching her up,
yes,
she went into visual and was chanting high-pitched tones, and I could stitch up there where she didn't feel anything.
Right. Yeah. Yes, quite excellent the work that you did with her, really. Yeah, very good. Okay, let's pause. So sometimes you'll want to elicit a state of dissociation. What would be the reason why you may want to elicit a state of dissociation for a person?
When somebody's saying they're so caught up in stuff and they can't see through it, overwhelmed.
Okay, so then that
to allow comfort.
Yes,
and distance.
Yes. Okay, any time when you're sensing that there's a need for comfort to be there with some situation the person's experiencing, and there's a need to move the person away from something, create distance.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Like how are you feeling about feeling angry?
Yeah, so that would be moving the person out, out of that state, right.
That's the tricky.
Well, I feel kind of like a shithead.
So did you hear what Annie said actually, which is very important, and that's,
Say it again.
what is dissociation? Dissociation is a reference point outside and away from this our locus center of gravity. Okay? So that's basically the definition of dissociation. Actually, there's a really good definition in the vestibular paper, which is exact, but basically that's what it is, I think. And then when a person is associated, it's actually a person moving toward and it's within. But that's what this associated means, actually. So sometimes, in fact, you're really wanting a person to move away from something, and so then you're wanting a degree of comfort to be there. So you can double dissociate the person. Well, the first thing that you want to do if you're creating a degree of dissociation is create an anchor for the present tense, feeling comfortable and relaxed and fully aware of their environment, so that you anchor that state. So anytime that you want to bring the person back to a full awareness of the external world and orientation, that you can fire off that anchor and it'll bring the person back. So once you've established a here and now anchor, okay, present tense anchor, then you can ask the person to imagine that they have the ability to see themselves out in front. Let's just say that the reason why you're wanting to do this is because there's something that the person has experienced which really was quite horrific and leading to traumatic experience. And that you ask the person, is there a way that we can work with this situation and that you can be comfortable? And you realise the person's sort of saying yes, but you know inside that it's no. But anyway, the main thing is that you find that the person's wanting more comfort to deal with this. So possibly to gain information, because they may be so caught up in the thing, it may be so close to them that allowing them to move back away from it a little bit enables them as feeling a sense of ease. So you could imagine that the person has the ability to be in a movie theatre and that they are sitting behind themselves, looking at themselves, looking up onto the screen. The screen can be something, something that actually the person's wanting to see through. Okay? And so the person's looking up on a screen at themselves involved in this activity, and then they get behind themselves and they're looking at themselves. Okay, so this is double dissociating. The more that you dissociate the person, the more likely it is that you take them into an area of the brain where something can occur on their leg or something like that, and they can hardly notice it at all. Okay, so mostly the person is moving away from being connected to their feelings and things, possibly so they can have insight into the process. You can, if the scene is something where then it's kind of traumatic, you can make it black and white. So what if there's some memory that you really would enjoy kind of moving away from, so you can make it black and white rather than colourful, okay? And you can craze it, you can dull it, you can move it further away, you can slow the action down. You can fit commercials in. You can see or hear the movie every 3 or 5 minutes or so. So they just see 3 minutes of it and then something else, and then 3 minutes of it and then something else. So you can do it that way. You can, if the person's in need of being in their body with this, and you realise that they're totally dissociated, right, and they've not yet come to grips with this, then and it's something that's kind of quite traumatic, and the person's in need of being able to be associated with the memory. They're wanting to be associated with the memory. So then what you can do to integrate that splinter psyche to become part of the person again is you double dissociate the person. Now, if you can use analog, that's very good too. So you can move the person back a little bit to dissociate more, back a little bit more to dissociate. So the movement becomes paired with the person's ability to dissociate. So let's say it's a traumatic experience, and the way that you're going to do this is the person's going to be in a movie theatre looking up at the screen of this thing occurring. And so you slow it right down so it's occurring just slowly, or you speed the whole thing up so that they see, go just to the very end, but not quite to the end, just before it finishes. And so you ask them to go to the place where just before the whole thing finishes. And at that point then when they indicate with an ideomotor dynamic, and then you ask the person to run it back really quickly, run the movie backwards very fast to the beginning, and to indicate when they've done that. And then again to go to the place just before the thing finishes, and to imagine that you have the ability to run the movie back really fast. Running the movie back really fast just before it finishes, what it does is it wipes out feelings. It separates the feelings from actually what it was that occurred there.
Running it in reverse?
Yes, running it in reverse.
When you say feelings, you mean kinesthetic?
Yes. Because it's the feelings that the person's, uncomfortable, about something that they see, and you're wanting kind of for them to be regular more or less, and still yet have the ability to glean, from this what's needed. So now, once the person's done this a few times, mostly, you're starting to dissociate the person's feelings from it. So once they've done it, they can go all the way to just before the movie finishes again, okay, so they can freeze the frame there whilst they come down out of the projection booth, because that could be 3 dissociations. The person could be up in the projection booth, they could float down, they could join themselves, the second person behind them, okay, they could come in and join the person that's been sitting there watching the show, and then they could get up from the seat actually and walk into the picture, and imagine they have the ability to run the movie backwards whilst they're in the picture actually running the movie backward.
You have them running forward first?
No, not necessary to. You could have them run forward once you've dissociated, but the main thing is that the person's integrated. The person has the ability to be associated if there's value for the person to be associated with this, rather than it being kind of a splinter in the person, where you're wanting to integrate, some experience the person's had for it to become part of the person again, rather than something that's separate.
What I mean is that you said you ran the movie forward and you ran it backwards, and then do that a few times, and then you said you have them start to associate with those various parts from the projection booth to this person, to that person, and then into the picture.
Yes, okay, so before you've done that, you've set this up in the person, right? So that first, getting a picture, a still picture, that's they can only just see, it's the beginning of the movie, and it's there on the screen, and it's frozen. And they're in the theatre looking up and seeing this. And then they take a seat behind themselves, looking at themselves, looking up at the screen. And then they float up into the projection booth. And then what they do is they ask them to take the picture to just before it finishes, and so they do that. And then what you do is you have the person run it backwards. And once they run it backwards, they indicate to you that they've done that, because you set up ideomotor dynamic. And then you ask them to go again just to the place before it finishes, and you have them run it backwards again quickly. And you do this 2, 3, 4 times real very fast like this. It's going to wipe out the feelings more or less. And so now what you do is you have the person float down out of the projection booth, join the person, that's the second person, right behind the person, join the person that's sitting, and then for the person sitting to get up then, and then go in, join the person that's in the movie just before it finishes, run the movie backwards whilst they're in the movie, running it backward. So then that's bringing the experience back into the person. Okay, so the major reasons why you'll want to use dissociation is generally because person's in need of moving away from something, having some distance, and mostly because there's a need for comfort to be there with something. Okay?
In this particular instance you just talked about, you've stopped the movie at the last frame.
Yes,
and then
just
you
before it
move up
finishes.
into the picture, and then you have them run it back as they are in the picture.
Yes.
Okay, then you have them run it forward while they're in the picture.
You could do if you wanted to. However, the most part is, if there was something the person was frightened to do, like they needed to be up there in front of a group or something and be doing something, and it was important that the person had the experience, actually, so they could first shape the experience. It might be something that's kind of so horrific, horrified about doing, that they need to be dissociated a little bit to see the process totally and to really adjust it so it's just perfect. And so then you would want to use this technique to bring the person back down, to hop into the movie and run it forward, so that the person has the experience in an integrated state, in an associated state.
There are some techniques that public speakers use. Maybe they're disassociation techniques where they'll either just always look right at the top of the people's heads, or another was to just imagine everybody out there naked. And it took away the pressure for them, feeling as though they were focused on that.
Yeah, being looked at or being kind of judged.
Right, so everybody else is making some big deal, understanding that's what clothes on and everything was okay.
Yeah. So sometimes you may imagine that, all kinds of techniques like this, that the people are your children, that you are loving each person and that you are really caring for them. Set up something.
People are your children? That's a good one.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right.
That's excellent.
Yes.
Is that a disassociation technique from...
It's a technique of drawing your strength and imagining your caretaking, your ability as a caretaker over the people, and in service of people, and your commitment to that. Because if it's family, you're really committed to that. All right. Now, what I'm going to want you to do, all right, is I want you to visually recall a time when you were having a wonderful time. And make sure that you see yourself in the picture, okay? Now, for you to see yourself in the picture, you've got to be dissociated, right? Okay, so then what I'd like you to do is to look and listen and comment, feel, look and listen, and comment and adjust what it is that you see. Okay, so it's just perfect, all right? Okay, hang on a second.
Why do you have to adjust it if it's a time that you were having a good time?
May as well,
Embellish it.
may as well embellish it if there's a way to do that. Put in some humour, or put in something that's, something that just jazzes it up a little, something, whatever. Use your imagination. Do something funny. Okay, visually recall a time when you're really having an excellent time. Make sure that you see yourself in the picture, and so your partner then is going to anchor you out of the picture. So you'll create an anchor for being out of the picture. Okay? And so then what you'll do is you'll look and listen and adjust things in the way that you'd like to adjust them. And then your partner will release the anchor. Okay?
I didn't understand when you said anchor someone out of the picture.
Okay. So when you're out of the picture looking at yourself, right, your partner will anchor that.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So your role as the operator working with someone is the ability to anchor. Find an anchor, a way of anchoring this. It could be with your voice. It can be with a kinesthetic touch. Mostly a person probably will have their eyes closed, more or less, to enhance the process. So you might not be able to do something visually, but you can do something auditorily or something kinesthetic to anchor it. Okay? Or it can be anchored internally to something in the that the person is seeing. So you'll find a way of anchoring it. The main thing is that the anchor simply is a way of getting back the desired response. You just fire off the stimulus and the response comes back. And so once you've adjusted the picture, then release the anchor, okay, so that the person can move into the picture. Once you've moved into the picture, look and listen and feel again whilst you're in the picture, and sense how things are, and then compare any differences. Okay, so...
do we compare the differences while they're still...
Yes, compare the differences whilst you're inside at that point after having made some adjustments. Okay? Now, you could either do this by recalling a time where you were having excellent time, or you could recall a time when things were a little messed up maybe or something, and you're really interested in being more resourceful in that moment. And so you can use this technique in this way as well. Okay, is everybody clear what to do?
Don't we have instructions on this in the book?
Yeah.
Page 78. So you can either recall a wonderful time, or you can recall a time when you were in need of having a resource, enjoy feeling more resourceful, so that then you're dissociating out of it to see what's going on, adjusting it and everything.
Is it necessary to set up what do you call it, an ideomotor dynamic? What do you call it?
An ideomotor dynamic.
Is it necessary to do that to get, so that they can tell you when they've got the picture adjusted like they want it?
I think it's a good idea, as much as you can be setting things up like that so the person's going out of their auditory self. It's more likely that they're going into an aspect of the brain that's involving vision and feeling, and it's going into that hemisphere, that's the right hemisphere, that's involved actually in really being able to create brain entrainment and connections with internal milieu, which the right hemisphere is involved in. So visualising and feeling, this is majorly what the right hemisphere is involved in. Right? Left hemisphere is majorly involved in production of language and things. So you're wanting to access this person's right hemisphere. So it's a good idea to set up ideomotor dynamic. So the person nods their head or does something like that when they've got it, so that you know to move on or when to anchor. Okay? Alright, I think it'd be a good idea to be in threes again. And also let's join a group of three that you haven't been yet with. I'm pretty sure that that's possible. Okay, so let's do this, and when you've finished it, I'm going to be floating around. Look up when you've finished it, and then we'll wrap this session up. What I thought we'd talk about is what it was that your experience was, and anything in fact that you learned that really can be added here to everyone. So who would like to start?
I learned that when I was associated, the feelings were a lot, the positive feelings were much stronger.
Robust and...
Yes, more intense and brilliant.
Okay. Excellent. Most of that is the case, isn't it? Somebody who's walking around in a dissociated state, generally there is a degree of kind of dullness, and the person's kind of separated somewhat from the robustness of the feeling of the moment. Yeah, that's true. Okay. Another thing that we learned over here before was that the difference between that and this. What is the difference between that and this?
That's over there and this is right here.
Excellent. So this promotes nearness, that promotes distance. Okay? All right. As a pronoun. Okay. What else? What happened over here with that you learned that we talked about a little bit with Penny?
One thing, to talk her through the different possibilities as far as what things look like and sound like and smell like, and
Feel like.
Helped her keep a picture.
Excellent. So that getting back the picture involved memory of association, other things that were associated to the picture. In fact, that brought back the picture again. Because sometimes a person's not so visual inside their head, at the surface, but they're visual a little bit lower down. And so that to get them back to that state of what the visual picture was again, there's a need for them to remember who it was that was there, maybe where it was that was taking place, what was happening on that day, slowly but surely fitting the pieces back again. Okay, so that's important. All right, what else do we have?
What we learned from the exercise, David and Annie and I, was that it would be a wonderful thing to do just before you were about to do something. if you've got to get up to give a speech or do a dance or whatever, to go ahead and guide yourself or guide another person who is going to do this through the experience of seeing